Welcome to Dirshu Daf HaYomi Bahalacha. Today we are continuing to learn Siman Ches, which is Hilchos Tzitzis V'Atifaso, the law of tzitzis and wearing them properly, which there are 17 sifim. Yesterday we saw Sif Aleph, so we're going to begin with Sif Beis, and we're going to continue up until not including Sif Vav. So today we're going to see Sif Beis, Gimel, Daled, and Hey. These are the three questions to be focusing on. First of all, what is the proper way for a person to wrap himself in his talus? When should a person cover his head with a talus? And the third question, what is the purpose of an Atara, which is this metal decorative piece which is on the top of the Tallit, or the again by the collar. What is the significance of this Atara? So let's begin with Sif Beis. So Seder Atifaso, the order of wrapping oneself in a talus, Kederech b'ni Adam shemischasin b'ksusam v'oiskin b'malachtam. It's like a person who would wrap themselves and cover them with some type of a cloth and to go out to work. Pamim b'kisoy harosh, pamim b'gili harosh. Sometimes literally with a covering on their head, sometimes without a covering on their head. V'nachon shiachase rosho b'talus. And he says it's good that you should have the talus covering your head. Okay. So on this, the Mishnah Berurah says, Begili harosh, diafagav demavarchin el hasatev. We said the bracha hasatev b'tzitzit. Kisu haguf l'chudi havi ituf. Covering the body is actually the ituf. V'ikar ha'ituf. So that is the main aspect. And then he says, shalshlim saviv savarim al kithfehen ein yotzei chovas sitzes b'zeh debechiyai gav nekoyam alav itafu. So some people, who they take the Tallit and they just drape it over themselves, almost like they're wearing a scarf. That's not ituf. It has to be covering the body, and that is what's necessary. Fine. And then it says, Talus, shekisu zeh machnia lev adam. This causes a person to develop an element of humility, fear of heaven, by wrapping yourself up in this talus. He quotes the Taz that says, the nachon shel yaser hakoiva hakatan shel rosha. You shouldn't remove the small hat on your head, beis atfila, av shemachas rosha b'hatalus gamkein. So you can say, if I have a talus on my head, why do I need to wear a kippah? The answer is, it doesn't matter. According to the Taz, you should still wear a kippah and have a talus as well. Then he quotes the Bach and says that you need to make sure that the talus is al rosho. The talus should be draped over your head. Midchilas hatvil ad sofa. Interesting. From the very beginning of davening all the way until the end. The whole time you should wear your talus over your head. You should at least have it over your head for 4 amos, the amount of time it takes to go that distance. And he says, quoting the Arizal, the machasa hatalus al tefillin shel rosh. He actually draped the talus so far that it actually covered his tefillin shel rosh. Some say that al kol panim lo yichas legamri, shouldn't cover the talus, that shouldn't cover the tefillin shel rosh completely. B'shas etifa, when you wrap yourself up, machasa rosho b'hatalis, you should wrap and cover your head with the talus. Ad shegia ad piv, it should go down to your mouth. Mashlich kol arba tzitziot letzad smoil. You take the tzitzis and you throw it over to your left. Ad shegia kedei hilach daled amos. You should at least keep it there. That's like for at least the amount of time it walks 4 amos, like 6 feet. V'yachach yoser hatifa ad shahashel rosho yehi niriksas. And you can unloosen it so your head can be seen a bit. V'yamid kolachas me'atzitzis al mekoimo. And each of the tzitzis will go to its respective places. He quotes also that mashma b'gemara shabachor if you have someone who is a yeshiva student, but he's not married, lo hoyimachasa rosh batalis, even if he's a scholar, he should still not cover his head. So in this, the Biurim Umusafim adds, which is number 5, he says, quoting the Levush, that Kishiyaskil Hisativ, when you begin to wrap yourself in the Talus, Koidim Shiyasativ Yivarech Lehem. Before you wrap yourself at all, you should say the bracha first. Then you wrap yourself. And on this, the Eliyahu Rabbah says, it's Mashma Shem Bevarech Koidim Atifa. No, that you're not supposed to make the bracha before. El B'shas Atifa Koidim Shiyasativ Yafeh. So you at least began the process of the Atifa, but you didn't completely wrap yourself up and take the tzitzis over your left shoulder. So before that, at least, that like in between part where it's somewhat on your head, that's when the bracha is said. How he says, the Mishnah Berurah quotes, quoting the Lashon of the Levush, regarding another situation, the Hainu Sheish Levarach Koidim Hatifa. Right before you're about to do the atifa, that's when you're supposed to say the bracha. So there is this discrepancy exactly at what point the bracha of Lasatif Tzitzis is supposed to be recited. So let's address at least the first 2 questions. What is the proper way for a person to wrap himself in his talus? So before saying the bracha, it is proper to hold the talus gadol once it is already unfolded. This minimizes the hefsek between the bracha and wrapping it on the body. Some are careful to only recite the bracha while holding the talus behind the back. Many achronim hold that the bias in the word batzitzis, the bays and batzitzis, should be pronounced with a shva. Others say the proper pronunciation is with a patach, batzitzis, or it's bitzitzis or batzitzis. The shva is a patach. After the bracha, one should cover his head and face up to his mouth, as we saw, with the talus. He should then sling the 4 tzitzis over his left shoulder and leave them there for the amount of time it takes to walk 4 amos. This is all quote from the Mishnah Berurah. The talus should then be positioned with 2 corners in the front and 2 in the back, as we again stated. Now, when should a person cover his head with a talus? So a person is not obligated to cover his head with the talus. Wrapping it around the body is sufficient. As we said, that's the ikra atifa. It is appropriate to cover the head, however, since covering is humbling and brings a person to Yiras Shamayim. So the words of the Mishnah Berurah talking about the element of Achna in Yiras Shamayim is if you put the talus over your head. So that element is that's supposed to create Yiras Shamayim. One should certainly cover his head for tefillah. According to the teachings of Kabbalah, the talus should cover the roof of the tefillin. During Shemona Esrei, one should pull the talus all the way up to his eyes. In some communities, Bachrim wear a talus gadol. They should refrain from covering their heads until they are married, which is the words over here of the Biurim Umusafin number 9. Become mashma shebachrim hoymisatmin betzitzis av koinen nesuin. That perhaps they do wrap themselves up with tzitzis before. Shnohagin shahanorim hagadoyim in misatmin betzitzis ad hanasuin. It's brought down the Das Hamaril that they would not do it until they got married. On this, the Mishnah Berurah wonders, Ketzad yu batelim oisim naorim and mitzvah sitzes ad hanasuin. V'nira masha kasav nusham. So again, it's an interesting phenomenon, which again, a lot of minhag Ashkenaz is that we only wear talus at the time of marriage, and of course, according to many of the Sephardic tradition, most will wear a talus at the time of bar mitzvah, which seems to actually be very logical because that's when you're mechuyev b'davar, so therefore it makes sense that maybe that's when you should start doing it. However, there is this inyan of a bachur not wearing a talus, or at least having it draped over his head. Okay, so again, Ayin Shum explaining the Mishnah Berurah is the reasoning behind why it's maybe not done, again, in Ashkenazic circles. Let's continue with Sif Gimel, Dalet, and Hey. So talitot katanim shalanu shanenu hagalibosh, the talus katan or tzitzis as we just call it. Alpha pi she'ein behem ituf yotz mehei choyves tzitzis. So even though there's no ituf, that's why we don't say for those who make the bracha on tzitzis, on the talus katan, you don't say l'satef b'tzitzit because you're not wrapping yourself in a talus katan. So you could actually still fulfill your mitzvah by wearing them. It's good to put it on your head, width to its height, so it's interesting. He holds that perhaps if one is able to, you should also wrap it around comparable to one would do with a regular talus. And the Mishnah Berurah says, so the ones who say that you need to have this element of ituf, but you at least need it for at least for a few moments, so therefore the din is that you could maybe wrap yourself up in your talus katan before you again put it on. And then he quotes that it appears that we're noyig sholavar klal al talus katan. We don't make a bracha, which is generally the minhag of someone who's married who wears a talus gadol. Rak poiter noiso bebirchas talus gadol. Insar klal is atifai. So you don't need this inyan of ituf because you're already doing ituf with your talus gadol anyway, shortly when you're about to daven shachris. So even though there is this potential chumrah, if you will, of doing ituf for your talus katan, that's dafke if you don't wear a talus gadol. But if you regularly wear a talus, so then there your ituf is accomplished. Siv Daud. Machazir shtei tzitzios lefanav v'shtayim la'acharav. You put two in the front and two in the back. Kedijei shedehei mesayvid b'mitzvah. So you're surrounded by mitzvahs. Again, which is the other, in addition to the issue of ituf, by wearing the talus like a scarf, but also you're having all the tzitzis in front of you. You're supposed to have two in the front, two in the back, so as to say you're completely surrounded by mitzvahs. Sif hey, mevarich lis atef b'tzitzis. That's the bracha that said. Im shnayim o shloisha mis'atvin b'talus ka'achas perish b'pam achas kul mevarchim. If let's say you have numerous people wearing the talus, so everyone makes a bracha. V'im rotzu echad mevarch, one can say the bracha. V'acherim yanu amen, as we know through the din of shemei ka'ina. Okay, so that is the bracha. So on this, the Mishnah Berurah says, "Ka'achas perish kol echad mis'atev b'talus miyuchad. Ela shebapam achas nasu kol ha'itufois lafuki la'acher kadei dibor lebirchaso dehavi hefsek b'sar kol echad levarcha atzmo ayin sham." Okay, so when it comes to this element of wearing the Atara, it says as follows. This is actually Yudal, the Mishnah Berurah. Nohag lasos Atara. It's a minhag to wear this Atara michatichas meshi was Siman. So you wear this special material to show she'oisen sitzis shalfanav you oil mafanav, so that the ones that are in front of you are always in front of you. Kamo she'amru chazal keresh zacha b'safon hayil oil b'safon. So the karushim, the planks which were in the north, always had to be in the north. So therefore, if there's no indicator what's the front or the back, so sometimes the tzitzis in the front will be in the back. So therefore, the element interesting of the Atara is so that a person knows how to put it on, so that is always the front. So that is the inyan, as it's brought down over here, of the Atara. And he quotes the Arizal and says, "Shlohaya Arizal makbid al zeh." He wasn't makbid whether the tzitzis are in the front, sometimes they're in the back, so that wasn't necessary, which almost is mashma that he didn't have or require an Atara. So what is the purpose of the Atara? There's a custom to sew an Atara, an extra piece of cloth that forms a border or frame on the edge of the talus. The Atara helps distinguish between the top and bottom of the talus. It allows a person to always wear the talus the same way. where the front corner is always in the front and the back corner is always in the back. If the upper part of the talus rips, one may turn it over and wear the bottom part on top. The poskim disagree about whether one should also be careful to always wear the talus on the same side and not turn it inside out. It is written that the Arizal was not particular about this way. About the way he wore his talus. So again, if let's say sometimes realize that if it's obviously if it's a metal Atara, but if it's a cloth Atara, so you don't necessarily realize, and all of a sudden you notice I'm wearing my talus inside out, or the Atara is this way and not outward. And so again, there are those people that are makbid on it, but we have reasons to support that it's not ma'akev if one didn't do it and wear it in a certain way. Okay, so let's see one question over here. Should one ideally cover one's head with one's talus during davening? So the answer is one should cover one's head. Some say that one should also cover one's tefillin, but not completely. Some say that during Shemona Esrei, one should cover one's head until one's eyes. Okay, Adka.